For the past 7 years, I've been painting portraits of people who have lived through trauma. And if you've seen the paintings around the cathedral, you'll know they're not portraits of faces, but more of emotions and healing journeys. Visual translations of lived experiences, attempts to give shape, colour and form to inner worlds that trauma so often renders invisible. Giving voice to what words alone cannot. Susanna, who we'll again hear from later, said this to me: "To be seen is something we all desire, but for those who've endured trauma, that need can feel even more pressing." So this afternoon we'll explore stories of pain, loss and survival, but not with any intention of shocking or saddening you, but to honour the strength it takes to grow from such experiences. This was a painting I did back in 2018, and in some ways this sums up what I was just saying rather better than words can. You can see a rose growing from out of the depth of the darkness and wilted flower buds, but also a rose growing towards the light. Does the piece evoke hope or sorrow? And I think that tension is part of the reason why some people find it quite an evocative painting. It was inspired by something a guy called Mac said in his therapy, and he said, "I feel like a twisted rose growing out of the dark into the light, but still carrying the scars of my past." You'll hear today from people whose journeys have inspired my paintings. Some are here with us, and others will be appearing on film. And I want to say to all of those who've shared their story with me over the years, thank you. Thank you for your courage and your honesty. I find it deeply humbling. And I'd also like to thank Coventry Cathedral, especially Georgia, who you see on the stage, for making this exhibition and this event possible. Throughout the afternoon, you'll hear about different ways of healing, and there is no one single path. But every journey starts with one essential thing, and that is safety. Safety in where you are, safety in what you share, and safety with whom you share it. So please listen to the stories gently, engage with care and empathy, and if at any time you feel the need to step away, do so. Any alert to distress and people will come to you. At the end of the session, I will put up the contact details for a local wellbeing helpline, but obviously there are other sources of help as well. So at its heart, being seen is about transformation, about growth, renewal, and finding meaning. The stories you will hear touch on some of the darker edges of experience, but I hope the art and the people within it remind us that beauty and hope can rise from pain, and that in being seen, we begin to heal. So thank you for being here and for helping make this space a space for empathy, courage and hope. So I touched on the agenda earlier on, and it's basically in two parts. You'll hear some of the people behind the paintings. There are a couple of pieces of video and 2 pieces of poetry that will be performed across the afternoon. And we'll have a break at about 3 o'clock, depending on how things flow. One piece of housekeeping: if you're not familiar with the cathedral, the toilets are that way. I say that should be it from me for a bit. So we go to the next video. and you'll hear from Em.
Good afternoon to everybody in Coventry Cathedral, which feels like a very strange thing to say from my little backroom office here in Devon. It's good to meet you all in this strange way. My name's Emma Flint, and I'm a peer support worker lead for Devon Partnership NHS Trust. I'm also a registered somatic movement therapist, having completed my 6-year training this July. And I'm really sorry that I can't be all with you in person. I'm very, very disappointed. However, my health is preventing me making big trips at the moment. And since the theme of this whole event is about how we look after our trauma and our recovery, I know that you'll get that. Still the same, I'm really disappointed because I really wanted to see Andy's beautiful exhibition again. You can probably see that the painting I'll be speaking to is on the wall proudly behind me from when this round of the exhibition was launched at the Institute for Mental Health in Nottingham last November. I really wanted to come and hear Justine's beautiful piece of music that she composed in response to this painting, and also to see Sarah and Heather and all the beautiful movers that you'll see today moving in response to the music, in response to the painting. There's just been a lovely widening of response to this piece of work that I'm really, really grateful for. So I'm personally very disappointed, but I think this short and slightly strange video of me talking about my journey with being seen offers something to you all. And had I been there, I would have opened the talk by just taking a look around at all of your faces, thanking you for your courage to come along and attend an event about trauma on a Saturday afternoon in a cathedral. It's an unusual mix of things, but I think it's really, really wonderful that we're making more space now to talk about trauma, which so many of us carry, indeed probably all of us carry in some shape or another. And any attempt to naturalise that, normalise it and depersonalise it, take away some of the shame and stigma is really important. So congratulations everybody there, just give yourself a little pat on the back for being present in whatever capacity you're there. So I'd like to speak a little bit about my involvement with the project. So as a peer support worker lead here in Devon, I'm very lucky to work with about 50 amazing colleagues, all with different lived experiences that support the Trust in its delivery of mental health, neurodiversity, justice system and gender identity services. Just a wonderful, wonderful group of people. And I'm personally very interested in the power of expression and witness when processing or talking about trauma therapeutically. And talking about is a strange phrase because, of course, some traumas don't necessarily have a reliable narrative, either because there's dignity and privacy around your story. You don't want the world to know it, and yet you still somehow want to be understood in the context of something very important that's happened. There may be secrecy. You may have been asked not to speak about it for legal or personal reasons. And then there's also a sort of third category of stories when we don't actually understand what happened to us because we weren't present. Maybe we were pre-verbal, maybe we were unconscious. And it's some of these traumas that I'd like to just very gently speak to. A lot of the work that I do is in training people to share their story without impacting too challengingly on the listener. Of course, I'm not there in person, so I can't sort of gauge that, but I'd really invite you to take care as you listen, and I'm going to take care a lot of in what I share in this recorded format. So I've had a number of traumas that have a very clear narrative, including losing a loved one in a car crash, another loved one by suicide, and these are stories where you can sort of tell the beginning, middle and the end. It's a story that even me quickly sharing there, you'll probably feel some rush of empathy or understanding for me. I can really understand why these things would take care and attention and a lot of gentleness to recover from. However, there's these other categories of trauma that I talked about earlier where there isn't a clear narrative. We're not sure what happened. There might be different versions of what happened. We might be relying on an unreliable narrator about something that happened to us, particularly if it was in those 4 or 5 years that every single one of us had when we were alive in the world, but we can't really remember what happened. And so I've lived my whole life with a major depression and anxiety disorder, and these were very much present before these later traumas that had a clear narrative. I sort of first noticed that something was a little bit different about my sense of safety in the world at the age of maybe 9 or 10, which led to an eating disorder. And but it was very difficult to pinpoint. And teachers and things would ask me, "What's happening? What's wrong?" And I'm lost. All I know is that I feel terrified all the time, and I can't explain why. And my somatic trainings have given me a greater appreciation for things that might have happened to me pre-verbally or neonatally that might be a part of this story. And I think they could be part of a story for many people. So compound trauma, so lots of different traumas of different types. And in working with Andy, I came across Andy's work as my work as peer support worker lead with your consultancy, gave some training to some of my colleagues, and I ended up on their newsletter, heard about Andy's exhibitions, and I thought, what a wonderful thing. So I met with Andy, and over the course of 4 or 5 conversations through a summer period, I talked about how somatic therapy, movement and the body, and understanding the embryological journey, that amazing infant movement journey that we all make from a little warrior pose baby on the playmat through to a walking, talking human. What a miracle that is. And also how amazing it is that most of us manage it. There's so much capacity and possibility for things to go a little bit wonky or even dangerously dangerous along the way. And as part of my studies, I studied embodied anatomy, anatomy and physiology. I just love human biology. It's a fascinating subject. And one piece that I learned, as I say this, I'm always conscious there'll be somebody who understands anatomy much better than me in the audience, but I learned that our nerve pathways, we have sensory nerves, and that these come into the spine at the back of the body, taking in information, what we see, hear, feel, the motor nerves that actually initiate movement, well, they don't initiate movement, that comes from somewhere else, but where the movement happens is from motor nerves that come from the front of the spine. So you sense everything that comes in at the back of the spine, and any movement that you make comes from motor nerves which emerge from the front of the spine. I'm really, really simplifying this because it's all happening trillions of times in a nanosecond, and there's no stimulus response as such. It's all mashed up together. But for me, in my personal practice, when I was training, I really enjoyed this idea of information coming in, response going out, information coming in, response going out, and how this movement was really helping me with times that I sensed when I'd had more than I could deal with. And this is something that trauma survivors say all the time, that it was just too much. It was too much. My system was overloaded. And so for me personally, repeating this movement, I probably repeated it for 2 years in personal therapy and with peers, this information coming in, turning it into a response, information in, turning it into a response, emerged in these 2 circles. And as I made these circles for Andy on camera, as you see now, we arrived at this beautiful image of Professor Kapiskis, the 2 circles connecting with a space of something new to emerge in the middle. And this ancient symbol is seen all around the world in various theological contexts. Here in the Southwest, we've got some beautiful examples. There's some beautiful ones at Glastonbury. And it was an important image in early Christianity too. And it said that when people met, they would link fingers together like this to share something of each other and make a space for something new to emerge between 2 people in a meeting. So it's a very, very rich image. And it's also pleasingly cellular, so there's a callback to sort of embryology and prenatal experiences that we might have had that we can't remember verbally and can only rely on parents and grandparents to tell us how it was for us as a baby. And the beautiful thing about authentic movement, which is one of the modalities that I studied, is there is an opportunity through the practice of authentic movement to move without narrative, to move in response to things that you may not understand. And in that practice as a witness, so you all will have witnessed the movement piece earlier, and there will have been a response from you to that movement piece in your body. You might have been excitement, fear, indifference, who knows, they're all valid. But in authentic movement, moving to something that's authentically arising in you, that's wordless, and having that witness or maybe even mirrored or echoed back by another is extremely powerful. I'll never forget the first time that I moved without really thinking of what my body was doing without any agenda or choreography. And then a very, very skilled, authentic movement practitioner replayed those movements back to me. And even as I speak it, there's so much emotion in the power of being witnessed in something that even you yourself don't understand. The foundation, the truth of it is something quite remarkable. So in making the painting, Andy made a machine to make these two circles, these two joining circles in the Venn diagram. And that really gave me a happy dance, because just like in my movement, in the movement therapy that helped me so much with my recovery, it was the same movement over and over again. But what do we know from the orbits of the planets and moons? We know that a tiny, tiny change in orbit can actually lead to dramatic change in ecosystems below. And that's how it was for me. Although this movement seemed very repetitious, the constant making of it and the very, very slight changes led to a transformation. And if you look at the painting up close, you can see, and from the machine that made the painting, that the circles are all much of the same pattern, but there's very, very tiny differences in each one. And that's my belief that recovery happens when we revisit the same material, but there's just a very, very slight change, a very, very slight difference that can really reframe our understanding of what happened to us, our understanding of the information, and change our response to it. And that's how it was for me. So I'm going to wrap up shortly, but it's my very, very dear wish for all of you then that this has been helpful to listen to, that it hasn't been difficult for you to listen to. I know it will take some courage to engage with the material that's here this afternoon, so I invite you to bring your body in as a companion to your understanding and your integration of what you see today. And it feels very poignant to think that these words will go into a cathedral. But my studies of human anatomy and physiology and embryology have given me a sense of the miraculous nature of the creation of a human being and the daily living of a human being. And that has really supported me at times when my mind felt that it wasn't possible to go on. The knowledge that my body is finding ways to carry on whatever we throw at it, this incredible, adaptable creature that we all get the privilege of looking after for however many years we're earthbound. It's a real miracle. If you want to contact me, you can do. I'm on Instagram as mflintsomatics. It'd be really lovely to see you there. But for now, I wish everybody listening a wonderful afternoon and take good care. Thanks for listening.
Yes, so as Em said, she was very saddened that she couldn't come. She sent me an email yesterday sort of apologising again, but I'm very glad that she did that video, very much from the heart. Is my volume dropped again, or am I? I'm okay. So the next thing you're going to hear is a poem written by Laura. Strangely, I met Laura actually in the Transport Museum Cafe in 2019. And this was during I created an exhibition of paintings called The Twisted Rose, and you've seen one of the paintings from that. And as a result of that, I met Mark, who you'll also hear from later on. And he introduced me to someone called Laura. And Laura shared with me some poetry she'd written as a late teenager. We're going to hear two pieces of poetry from Laura. Firstly, the one she wrote when she was a teenager, and then we'll also hear in the second half a poem she wrote last year, which is the basis for a painting which is on display in the exhibition. So I'm going to invite Leona Frazier to read Let Me Feel.
Let me feel. Let me feel heart-wrenching anguish and cascading despair, because to this All my physical pain can't compare. Let me cry. Let me sob uncontrollably, like a scene from a play, as I fantasize about the suffocating grasp of dismay. Let me break. Let me crumble to pieces. Let me slide to the floor as panicked hands pound against my barricaded door. Let me fear. Let me know how it feels to be desperately afraid. Remind me that hurt comes from more than a blade. Get me help. Replace my disconnecting numbness, this emotional anesthesia. Guide me away from my self-inflicted amnesia. Let me care. Let me go over it again in my mind. Let me indulge in the sorrows of the memories I find. Let it hurt as I'm hypnotized by red tumbling drops. Let the pain reach a place where this hopelessness stops. And let me rage as I fill up half-empty ouzo with water. Let me continue this quest of apparent self-slaughter. Watch me as I creep across the cobbled border of the gravelled drive, seeking comfort from medicines far from prescribed. Ask me. Ask if the damage I'm causing is just a distraction in a world seemingly concerned with only my actions. Let me speak. Through my words to most considered disfavour, see that this runs deeper than adolescent behaviour. Let me feel. Let me feel that I wasn't to blame. Can I connect to emotions that aren't guilt or shame? Read my diary. I left my childhood there. I want it back. Teddy bears, nobody cares. Broken toys on the footpath. Let me feel. As I lie still on this hospital bed, wounded arms, blankly staring at the textured ceiling above my head.
I have to commend Leonie for getting through that. I tried to read that poem once at an event, and I got about 3/4 of the way through and then started to struggle. I'll talk a little bit more about Laura in the second half, and as I say, we'll hear another of her poems written last year. I think it was evident from that poem that she was grappling with a lot of questions and a lot of anger about what had happened to her. And as we'll see later on, some of those questions were more resolved. I'm now going to invite Chick to tell his story. If we go to the next slide. I met Chick online in 2020 during that amazing period of lockdown. I did a series of paintings with Marissa called Portraits of Isolation. And welcome, Chick.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Is that okay? Right. Oh, sorry. So, first I will read a poem, and then I will talk a little bit about this amazing piece of artwork, and there's another one subsequent from this. Survived, needlessly died. I lay to catch a breath, but the words echo from Dr. Death. Over 20 years NHS worked. Each year, many lives saved. But on that faithful day, March 23rd, my life was nearly paid. Management consumed in a panic. I was thrust into the unknown. Now lying in ICU Papworth, no family, all alone. God alone knows why I survived. Ancestors, rugby, sheer will, not to ever forget those who needlessly died. Fight to stay alive. Fight against those who lied. Fight for family justice. Fight for every soul that needlessly died. When I met Andy, I had just come out of a period of a massive health change. I work as a nurse within child and adolescent mental health services, and I was working frontline in A&E in North London, where I contracted COVID. So I contracted it in March 2020, so it was the first wave. From there, being discharged 3 weeks later, there was a lot of further struggles in my life. And that still continues to this day. So what's really emotional for me standing here is this is the second time I have talked about this. My family don't want to know. My partner, the kids, it's too painful because I nearly died. So this is the only place I get to share that. This painting I had given to me, and only place I could put it is in my garage. It was not allowed in the house. It's too painful. It basically is a scene of me in hospital. But you'll see there are many colourful and different images around that very devastating picture. So a little bit of context. My name is Chikezie Knox Macaulay. It's a West African name. Chikezie is how it's pronounced, but it's Chik when you're living in England. It is a Nigerian name, but I'm half Sierra Leonean, half Suffolk. So I was born in England, but I was raised in both Sierra Leone and Nigeria before I came to England. In the 80s, right in the middle of the Brixton riots, but I was in Suffolk. Right boy, can't read right boy and drive a tractor. It is very difficult when you have an accent like this to try to understand what is being said. Anyway, I am very fortunate that I embrace both my cultures, my African culture and my English culture. But I had a lot of mental health problems. I didn't realise that at the time, a lot of anger, a lot of aggression, that actually led me to want to express that through playing rugby. That was the best way to express my anger. But I was a sickly child because I had asthma. So I had to do a lot of training, extra training, which in turn helped my asthma. And little did I know that rugby was saving me in two ways. One, keeping me out of trouble, and either I'd be dead or in prison if it wasn't for rugby. But the other thing is when I ended up in ICU in Papworth, I'm a 50-year-old asthmatic, and the doctor says, I don't get this. Why am I not having to ventilate you, put you to sleep, because your lungs are still going? When I explained that I had quite a good career in rugby, representative, semi-professional, he would tap the end of my bed and said, rugby's saving your life. So that really is the standout of the picture. The other designs are synonymous to West African designs, and you'll see in the corner there's some tattoos. I have tattoos. They're covered at the moment, but in the corner that's the seahorse, and the seahorse is one of the very few male animals that carry the birth of, once gestation happens, then they carry it to delivery. And I sort of value my family, and I see myself in that role. So that was what I was living with when I first met Andy. I've gone through periods of anger, survivor's guilt, depression, and long COVID, which I still am working through at the moment. I have just now, this is my 5th year, and I'm just now starting to work part-time. So, long COVID is long. But there is movement forward, and we'll move on to the next picture, please. It's interesting for me to see this now, because this was a few years later. And I'd probably feel there should be another picture, but this I think is as good as it describes where I am at the moment. And the picture is really how I live my life. There are moments where I am the COVID person, the patient, and there's moments when I'm not. More than likely, in isolation, that is when I am the COVID person. When I'm out in public, I'm not, because people see me standing like this and they go, oh, you're fine, you're okay. I've never had COVID. The pandemic's over. We're all walking around, we're all intermingling. We're not wearing masks. We're not social distancing. But COVID is still there, and the effects of it are still there. And so, in meeting with Andy, what was brilliant is that we sat and talked through, and we shared ideas. And the picture on your left-hand side is really that isolation, that fact of having to deal with the everyday aspects of having and being in that moment from way back in hospital. But then there is the other side to me, the duality, the voice, the other voice saying, you can do, you can be, this is a new you. You did it before when you were ill as a child, and you went from being a 9-year-old kid who couldn't walk a flight of stairs to playing for England in your 20s. So you can do it. But it's really difficult, because at the end of the day, the isolated me is when I'm walking around on the streets. It's when I'm at home. So the fact that now I have, and there is a visual recognition of my experiences. It's a bit like for sportsmen who get a representative shirt and they put it up in a club. That is their identity, to say that I have done something, and this is my identity. So I'm forever grateful to Andy for actually making it possible for my experiences and what I've gone through to be visible. And I wish everyone could experience this, because we all suffer our traumas, and we just get on and move on. But actually, do we really move on? And our traumas sometimes are things that actually I'll go away from today thinking about where I was at, but thinking about where I am at and where I can move forward to. And I want to thank Andy for that, because this is a constant reminder of actually how I've overcome things and moved forward. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much for coming and giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chick. I've been lucky enough to meet Chick a few times over the last few years, and Alison and I met him in Cambridge last year, and we had a lovely chat, taking photographs of each other out on the me posing as don't quite work as a version of Chick, but we had ourselves sit side by side, so it was good fun. So the next contribution is a piece of video, and it was made by myself with Sky, and this is quite a hard watch, so just be ready for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about Sky and where she's at now. But she is someone who has been struggling for a while to get the help she needs. And I won't say any more than that, but she's a wonderful person, and she's desperate to help other people.
I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be heard. My parts didn't want to be seen or heard. Well, they wanted to be seen, but they couldn't be heard. And this was a way of me being heard and actually not seen. It initially was just a rainbow. And my reaction when a rainbow is painted that beautifully, and Andy and I had the discussions, it reminded me of those discussions of how excited I was that there was a perfect yellow in the middle, and it was vibrant and bright and full of joy, and I guess that's the essence of how I would like to be and like to feel. But it was more that he perfectly blended the other colours into it without it becoming dirt and sludge and grey. And I've never been able to do that myself, and so I learned something. I learned that you have to put on the yellow first for it to become I'm giving away a tip here. I'm not sure I'm allowed. Like a secret, for it to become a glow, the yellow has to come first, if I'm getting this right, and then the others around it, otherwise it becomes like a dirt on the page. And I guess, for me, it's the reverse. I kind of had to have the dark and the sludge and the murky merges before I could become that glow. And so I liked that image. And it had the little bubbles and the little undulations, and it was just pure happy, bright. It was pure, for me it represented the spectrum, and they were coming together in a united collection of, I guess, me. It encapsulates all my parts, identities, alters, people call them different things. It also represents a mirage, because you can see a rainbow, but it'd been gone in an instant, and so could I, and so could that particular part of me. You can't really have an aspect of the rainbow without the whole, or if you can, it doesn't complete the right picture. And I have a very definite definition of what a rainbow should look like for me. All the colours have to be in precise order, and a collection as a whole. And it reminded me also of all the people who have helped me along the way, and they call those allies, and it just represented all the good among my journey, and I wanted to keep that. But we decided that wasn't where I'm currently at. When that was halted quite abruptly and quite dramatically, re-traumatizingly, and especially when I see the image of the glass being shattered on the video montage and the sound that comes with that, it is intensified the symbolism of it, and I feel it much more. The sound, if I were to be able to make one, probably is quite accurate to the slow and painful way that my journey has been drawn out. I guess the title came about because of the illusion of the rainbow. I call it an illusion because that's how it feels right now. And so the shattered comes from that. And the rainbows are currently hidden. And the shards are really painful. And they're in multiple places, just like my multiple parts. And the worst thing is when there's such disbelief. So I guess that's where the title came from, is the current place on this path. But equally, it could be shards of others too, because I know I'm not the only one. And the pain is also in the silence. And I guess the shards could also represent the parts of me that hurt me or have tried, and yet they were only in pain themselves, being hurt by other shards of trauma memories. I felt valid, and I felt validated, and I didn't have to be seen for that to happen. I didn't even have to speak, and that was believed, and that was okay as well. There was no judgment. There was no judgment. Just curiosity and total acceptance. And my hope is that in the next stage, as time evolves, and my journey does too, that I'll be able to be seen and heard.
So, I'm not going to say very much about Skye, but she's been diagnosed with something called dissociative identity disorder, which, if any of you have any knowledge of mental health issues, it's a very complex condition and one that is very hard to treat. But what is very frustrating is that when I talk to her, she's a staggeringly intelligent woman with a degree in psychology, and yet she struggles on a daily basis to actually leave her room. So trauma affects people in very different ways and is very complex to treat. I'm going to pass you over now to Mark. I met Mark again in 2019 after we'd done the first Twisted Rose series. And I did that with Marissa, who you'll also hear from this afternoon, and Marissa then introduced you to Mark, and I did another painting of Mark. So that series gradually got bigger and bigger as the exhibitions went on. So I'll not say a lot more. I'll let Mark say whatever he wants to say about himself, but I think you'll enjoy hearing him.
I wish you had said a bit more, because I've got absolutely no idea what I'm going to say. I feel very privileged to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for doing the painting, Andy. It's really interesting reflecting on the painting 6 years later, and I think it has a very different meaning to me now. When that was painted, I just started going through a process of giving presentations around my story, a little bit of which I'll share with you in a minute. And I think the process of giving those presentations, and specifically about the conversations I have with people after them, has been the most, probably the most validating way of me processing my trauma and sharing my story, but more importantly, hearing people's questions as a result of that has been hugely important. And I think that this resonates more with me now than it did when I first saw it, which is interesting. So probably if I tell you a little bit about me, I'll check the time because I know we've got a specific amount of time. I'll check, and then I'll talk a little bit about the painting, and then if anybody's got any questions when we have a break, I'll be delighted to answer them. I'm much better at answering questions than I am at speaking. So my name's Mark. I'm a police officer, have been for 23 years. I was sexually abused as a child by a family member in another country over the course of 3 summers. I was sent there to stay with them on my own, with him on my own, and I believed that I was the person who was responsible for the abuse. And as a result of that, and as a result of going home and suppressing everything, I developed all kinds of anxiety and depression over the next few years, which resulted when I was 15 in me attempting to take my own life. Around the same time when I was 15, I was involved in a Warrington bomb and was present on Bridge Street for the second bomb, which had much more of an impact on me than I realised. I don't think I realised until a good 20 odd years later that had had the impact on me that it had, because there was a lot of other stuff going on for me. So I didn't want to tell anybody what had happened to me, but when I was 15, it was a busy year when I was 15. When I was 15, my sister started wanting to go to Canada, and I thought that if she did, then she would be abused, and that set up this kind of wave in me. And I did eventually get to a situation where I told my mum, and one of the really resonant things about this idea of being seen is a big part of me was not able to talk about what happened for 20 years or more, probably 25 years. And the words would get stuck at my teeth, and I wouldn't be. I had to get myself into a situation where I was able to talk about it, which I did with my mum by crying until she came and found me, which took a really long time to find me. So I was stuck to my table by the time she did. And then, as a result of that, clearly my sister wasn't then allowed to go to Canada, but nothing really further was done with that. So I don't think I was very seen by my mum or my dad, which is a shame, and probably looking back contributed to some of the stuff that happened later on in life. Fast forward to being in the police for a few years, and I realised that I hadn't told anybody officially what had happened. I hadn't told anybody in authority, and he could still be abusing people. So I again had this kind of idea I need to disclose, but didn't want to disclose. But I had a colleague who recognised something was going on with me and asked me in a really appropriate way, and I was able to be seen there and tell him what had happened. And it ended up a few years later in a court case, and my abuser was convicted. And that was a big turning point for me. Not necessarily the conviction, but the being seen by the people who took that forward and represented me in court. So as part of my job, I am a negotiator. So I deal with people who are in crisis, who are suicidal, and I do trauma debrief after a really horrible incident. I'm part of a team that does some trauma debriefing, and I also do work with Marissa around peer support, and I also investigate sexual offences and deal with victims. And I think all of those things, when you put them together, very simple. It's not simple, it's really complicated, but they have a commonality around allowing people to open that box. And I think that's how I've always considered it. I put all my trauma into a box for many years, and the box, it's this box here, in fact. When stuff's trapped in it, it poisons you. That's my experience. It poisoned me, it caused all kinds of problems. That's very common. I hear that a lot when I talk to people. And what being seen means for me is being allowed to open that box, and I try and do that for other people, because I think it's the most powerful thing that we can do is to just listen to people. That's the essence of peer support. It's the essence of negotiation. It's the essence of being a good police officer, I would argue. It's being present and allowing people to tell their story. And that is how I got better, and I think that's how we collectively get better. I've been absolutely struck by all the people who've spoken so eloquently before me, the connections in and the commonality around trauma and suppression, and the impact that it has, the impact of not speaking, the impact that has on people. So the painting is very simply my box of trauma that was hidden for many years. And inside that box, Andy asked me what would be inside it. Well, the happiness of the good place that I go to is Arran, the Isle of Arran in Scotland, where we go every year, family holiday, and that's my dog. And it's taken from a photograph where we managed to get my dog on a beach on Arran with her underneath a rainbow. And that's sort of pure joy to me, pure peace, and the opposite of trauma. And I think that simply is the essence of being seen is being heard for me, and being allowed to talk about your trauma. And there's lots of examples that have already happened, and I'm another example of when we allow ourselves to share our story, when we allow ourselves to open that box, we get better. And I think that's the thing that we forget when we're in the midst of trauma. We can forget that we get better, and that there is hope, and that is, I am living proof that is the case. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks a lot, Andy. Cheers.
So we're going to take a short break now. What time is it? It's 15:08. So we'll start again at 3:20, and you'll hear from Marissa and Paul and Jamie, and you'll hear another poem. Thank you. I hadn't met Jamie until last week. I did this painting back in 2016, and my then supervisor is actually sitting at the back of the hall, because I did it as part of my MA at Coventry. And I did a series of paintings around conflict and hidden conflict. And I created this piece based on, it was taken from one of those wonderful Ideal Home magazines, and the perfect kitchen and everything nicely in place. But I was also reading information around domestic abuse and how it's hidden, and how the signs of it are often maybe not always quite so visible as you'd think they were. So I exhibited this painting in a couple of other places, and Jamie got in touch with me, having seen it. I forget exactly where it was exhibited, but Jamie saw it somewhere, and it resonated with her. So when we were putting together this exhibition and the event around being seen, it struck me as a really powerful idea to ask Jamie to come and talk. And Jamie's from Coventry Haven, and she'll say a little bit more about that as well. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamie, Development and Funding Officer for Coventry Haven. I'm also a survivor of domestic abuse who achieved a prison sentence for my very violent abuser. Thanks to Andy for creating Being Seen, because that's what this is really about. It's what happens when women are finally seen after desperately trying to stay invisible. When I think about being seen, I think about visibility in the truest sense, not just being looked at, but being understood and believed. For a long time, I wasn't seen, not really. I was invisible in the life I was living. On the outside, everything looked fine. I smiled, I worked, I said the right things, but behind closed doors, my reality was very different. I was trapped in a world that slowly removed who I was. The control came quietly at first, decisions made for me, boundaries blurred, the constant monitoring and surveillance of me and my life, the constant undermining that made me question my own judgment. Before I realised it, I'd stopped making choices of my own. My thoughts, my actions, my confidence were all shaped by fear and by what might happen if I didn't keep to his rules. I lost sight of who I was and I stopped recognising myself. And just like he did around other people, I became incredibly good at pretending. That's what so many of us do. We survive by not being seen. We hide to stay safe. But what happens when hiding becomes your whole existence? For me, it meant shrinking, of apologising for things that weren't my fault, of feeling that the abuse was somehow justified because I'd been told it was. It took a long time for me to realise that what I was living wasn't love. It was control, it was fear. And fear is a very powerful trap. And I took even longer to believe that I deserved better. The first time I said the words out loud that I was scared of him and what he was capable of, it was terrifying. My voice shook, my body shook, but in that moment I was seen. Someone listened and they believed me. That small act of being believed changed everything, and that is so hugely important for a victim survivor, to be believed. That's why events like this matter, because visibility saves lives. When we see survivors, when we listen without judgment, we give back something that abuse takes away: dignity, belief, and the hope and possibility of recovery. When I came to Coventry Haven, I was broken but not beyond repair. The women there saw me, really saw me, when I couldn't see myself. They gave me space, belief, and time, and slowly I started to rebuild. Now I have the privilege of working for the same organisation that saved my life. That sounds massively cliche, but it's 100% true. If he didn't kill me, then I would have done it myself. During his second breach, I had attempted to take my own life as I could see no other way out. Coventry Haven helped me survive. I know that other women have found that same courage, that same voice. They walk through our doors thinking they are nothing and leave knowing they are everything. That's what being seen does. Today, as part of Andy's Being Seen exhibition, I'm reminded how powerful it is to bring stories out of the shadows. Each one says, I'm still here, I didn't deserve any of it, and I matter. And for every woman who's still invisible, still hiding, still afraid, I want you to know you are seen, you are heard, and you are believed, and there is a way out. Thank you for listening.
So earlier on you heard a poem by Laura, read by Leonie Frazier. And I say that poem she showed me in 2019, and I was the first person to see any of her poetry. And at the time she was very angry, and she was trying to understand what had happened to her, and she was working with the police to investigate. I met her again last year, ahead of this series of paintings, and I said, could you do another painting about who you are now and where you are now? And she said something which was really interesting, which was, I don't feel the need to write poetry anymore. And I thought that was quite telling, that desire had actually dropped away. And I won't say a lot more because she talks about it in the poem. So, Leonie.
I don't know who they see. That's all I wrote. For weeks and weeks. Those 6 words lay joined together, holding hands and feet beneath the sheets of lined paper. I don't know who they see. Was all that marked the first lines of my son's plastic-bound notebook, page after page of clean paper. But somehow that's all I wrote on the question I probably pondered the most. Which version of myself was painted? What image of myself did I allow to be created? Can they see the parts of me I've always hated? Maybe I smiled. Maybe I allowed myself to feel joy and then got trapped on the outside of my own happy moment, looking in, pressing my skin against the glass box that surrounds the snippets and scenes of what looks to be my reality, shielding me emotionally from my own positive experiences, somehow stuck on the outside of my world, just looking in, battling to get closer to the here and now, but then quickly giving in to that more recognizable state of being simply displaced. I don't know who they see. I suppose I could seem quite free, unkempt hair that goes to even greater lengths than I'd go to hide myself from me. Masses of brown, a hair for each of my darkest days. And now, coarse greys, growing up and out in the most peculiar ways. And a kink from hair tied back, from being dragged into my world by my ponytail. I don't know who they see. Maybe the person I am, subdued, wrists bound in leg restraints at 3:15. I don't know who they see. If, like me, they flinch at every inch of my exposed flesh, like it's poisonous. Whether they see the subtle dark rings beneath my eyes and assume I lie awake at night and cry. Or just that I'm aging, or burned out, that I have stories to tell, or that I'm just tired. Whether I seem weathered, whether they see I've been fighting forever, whether they know I never say never, whether it looks like I have my shit together, or whether I'm clever. Whether they see the teenage girl who flashed her chest and said, whatever. I don't know who they see. I'm loud, I'm quiet, I'm powerful, I'm weak, I'm trapped, I'm free. I'm 13,455 days and counting. I'm every memory I've recounted.
So as Laura said in the poem, she struggled to know what to say in 2024 about herself. But there was one line from that poem: I don't know who they see. I'm loud, I'm quiet, I'm powerful, I'm weak, I'm trapped, I'm free. that really resonated with me, because it was kind of talked about this person, and you are all of those people all at the same time. But what we did was we created a painting. So these are all versions of Laura sitting around her kitchen table. I'll let you to work out which of those fits which persona. But the mugs and the outfits were chosen quite deliberately. And one of the things she said was, it's the first time I've looked at myself and not looked away. And that, again, Laura has the ability to move me quite profoundly at times. But I think we heard the earlier poem from Laura, and it kind of touches on a number of things, and things that Mark has said and other people have said, is that with trauma, the first stage is feeling safe somewhere. And Jamie talked about this. Feel safe to share something, but often there's also a stage of feeling very angry and wanting to understand what's happened and really questioning what's happened. And there's another thing that kind of goes with that, which is actually mourning and grief for what you've lost. Because in the case of Laura, there was a child that she lost because of a man. And there's lots of questions and anger she feels about that. But then the third stage is about reconnecting and rebuilding yourself. And I think what we saw in the Laura painting and what I see in Laura's life is that sense of starting to reconnect. And Laura has, she's a powerful activist around rape counselling, rape crisis, but she's also a successful businesswoman and a mother of a very talented son. So you do see lots of versions of Laura, but I think she is connected back into the world in a way that she wasn't when she wrote that first poem. So the next person you're going to hear from is Marissa, and I'm going to embarrass Marissa a little bit to start with, but when I first started working on, I mentioned this series of paintings called The Twisted Rose, and I did that with the Institute of Mental Health in Nottingham, and it was Gary Winship, who was also here, his idea, because I approached him to exhibit some work I'd done as part of my MA, and he said, actually, why don't you do a new series of paintings around trauma and work with us on that? And the first person I was introduced to was Marissa, who at the time was the peer support lead for the IMH. And I think Marissa thought, who is this idiot who knows nothing about trauma? And I've got to guide this naive, but actually I think realised quite quickly that I wasn't quite as simplistic as it might have appeared on paper. But Marissa has since then been my guide in many things and my anchor throughout a lot of these projects. And it's again, I'm honoured to have her speak again.
I'm just going to take a moment to look at everybody, and likewise I feel really honoured today to be speaking. Thank you so much for your generosity on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you for being present, thank you for listening, thank you for staying. I feel like it's a really emotive point in the event for me to speak, so I have prepared a few words, but it's joyful being here, so thank you. As a long-serving mental health nurse in the NHS, director of With You Consultancy, specialising in peer support, and with my own personal experiences of distress, I have listened to, witnessed, and personally felt the rawness of hopelessness and despair. Within practice, I felt like I had a front row seat to the diversity of traumas and observed that it can be re-traumatising for people to simply tell and retell an account of loss or trauma. In mental health, perhaps more than other health or social care fields, People who use services are familiar with having to recount their own experiences as part of assessments and involvement in clinical care. It is commonplace to have to share your story, but do we choose to share these? And do we always feel validated and seen? It could be suggested that this has only worked in one direction. The sharing of stories has not been mutual. Professionals are often discouraged from sharing too much and are encouraged to remain separate, hiding their own stories of vulnerability, allowing only parts of our psyche that we deem safe and palatable for human sharing. This can leave us feeling stuck and cause more pain. 16 years ago, I had my own story to tell, standing on a knife's edge of losing my beautiful and fierce dragon-hearted daughter. Only seeing shades of red, blue and grey, not a pink newborn baby, but through my lens, a big, pulsating, dusky-coloured heart, all wired up. Internal, conflicting and dominating thoughts of wanting it all to stop. Not knowing if I had the courage or mental capacity within my acute distress to hold on for fear of all scenarios. Stopping would mean the suffocating silence and the heart not pumping, which would also be inconceivable. Sheltered momentarily in the kitchen area of the cardiac ward is where I experienced the power of love, faith, hope, and peer support, the mutual sharing of similar experiences. Lived experience knowledge feels unique. It's based on our experiences which form stories of multiple perspectives, feelings, and details. There is no one complete version of our story. Our personal stories change and unfold over time, with our reflections or with the responses of the people we share them with. A trauma-informed approach isn't the absence of fear, but the presence of connection. Stories are important, especially where we might not have previously told them. Shame and fear might have held us back. Once we start sharing them, our stories become catalysts to seek out more like our own, to find our people and hold hope for one another. Peer support has radical roots in activism and social justice. Traditional services have dominated mental health knowledge, but there is a growing recognition that lived experience knowledge embodied in our experiences is an equally valid form of truth. This knowledge and shared humanity is at the beating heart of this exhibition. Within the principles of post-traumatic growth and self-compassion, we need to remember and celebrate our uniqueness, our collective and collaborative knowledges. We know that stories touch, change, transform, and support a route to liberation. Peer support workers working within services like M continue to lead the way in supporting people to respond to traumatic experiences in non-traumatic ways, and for people to tell their stories in ways that make them stronger. Working alongside Andy and being a participant has been a truly full-fat experience for me and incredibly soul-soothing. Red symbolises the heart. Red signifies the colour of the heart and the blood in our body. Every second of every day, our heart pumps blood into our bodies to ensure that we can continue to live our lives. We use this colour to remind us of our hearts and our health. My portrait has enriched my story and allowed me to see colour, rather than the translucent shade of blue within heart failure. It deepened my understanding of trust, being, and belonging, and celebrates the fabric of Gretel's scar. I do hope you will all take this exhibition to your hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Marissa. So we're getting towards the end of the afternoon, and there's one last speaker who I very much enjoy listening to Paul when we go to the next slide, Georgia. Sorry. I'm not going to say very much about this painting. I mean, Paul will say everything that needs to be said. It was one of the paintings I was very moved by this painting. But what I think is interesting is someone asked me at the beginning why so many of the people I've painted are women or women's stories, and it struck me that that's very much true. And I don't know what that says about the different men and women wanting to share their stories. When I first started talking to Paul, the painting was going to be about his physical struggles as a result of an accident. And quite a few of the other men I've painted, that's been the same case. Whereas the women I've painted have been much more ready to share their more emotional side of their stories. So I was saying, when I met Paul, I wasn't quite expecting this to be the journey we went on, and I don't think Paul was either. So anyway, I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you everyone for being here. I will get to the painting, but first I'll just give you a bit of background of why I'm standing in front of you now talking. So if I can quickly take you back 8 years to a lovely spring day in May, I, along with Elaine, my partner, were taking my daughter and her best friend to the first ever concert on their own at the Manchester Arena. Elaine and I made sure they got in fine and just said, have a great time, and we'll meet you in the foyer after the concert's over. Elaine and I went into Manchester. It was a lovely evening. It wasn't raining, which is unusual for Manchester, and we had a nice meal, and the talk at that time was very much about our upcoming house purchase. We were in the process of buying our forever home. At the time, I worked at Jaguar Land Rover in Halewood in Liverpool, and Elaine was a detective constable for Cheshire Police. We made our way back to the arena, and probably as you all know, while we were waiting in the foyer, a suicide bomber detonated the bomb. I suffered catastrophic life-changing injuries. I could stand here all day in front of you listing my injuries, but suffice to say, I spent 15 days in a coma and 9 months in hospital after the bombing. I've had countless surgery and ongoing surgeries in hospital, and since I've been out, still got more surgeries on the horizon. I really struggle, and I really try hard to disguise my injuries. And I hope if you see me and you think, you look okay, I take that as a compliment. Elaine, who was standing next to me, she was killed instantly. While I was in hospital, after being brought out of a coma, I was told of Elaine's death, but I was on that much medication and drugs I don't even remember being told. That moment when you're told the love of your life has been killed, and you should have that outpouring of grief, that primal scream, that was taken away from me as well. After coming out of hospital, while I was in hospital, I was constantly told, don't worry about coming out, Paul. There's loads of help for you. You'll be looked after. and you just concentrate on, you know, getting better. When I eventually came out of hospital, I still wasn't well enough to live on my own. So I moved in with my elderly parents. My mum had dementia. My dad was struggling looking after her. He was in no position to look after me, but that's fine because there was tons of help waiting for me when I came out of hospital. I unfortunately came out of hospital to nothing. There was no one knocking on my door. I remember saying to myself, Paul, you've been in hospital too long and they've forgotten about you. I quickly, all the hard work I did in hospital, learning to walk again, learning to talk, eat, dress myself, felt like a waste of time. And I quickly went into a deep bout of depression and didn't leave the house for nearly 2 years. What saved me was a charity called Day One Trauma, who I'm now proud to work with as a peer supporter. And they were what I needed from literally day one. They helped me, they put an arm around me, they helped me accessing benefits. For someone who's worked all their life, that was a nightmare, re-traumatising, and I wasn't even accessing benefits. There was no one there to help me access them. And they did all that for me. They also offered me peer support, which was a lifesaver for me because I'd bottled everything up. I couldn't talk to the people closest to me because it was too distressing. And being able to speak to someone who had gone through a similar experience, not exactly the same, but similar, was, you know, therapeutic for me and led me on to then find confidence in myself. At this point, I had no confidence in myself. I thought my life was over and, you know, the rest of my life felt like a prison sentence. But they, you know, over a number of years, built my confidence. I now have gone on to work for various other charities offering peer support, for homicide victim support. I work for Survivors Against Terror and a new charity called 3 Nines. And that has given me a sense of purpose, a reason to get up, and having something in your life when you've lost everything is really important. Because for a long time I had nothing. I was lost and directionless. With my work with Day One Trauma Support, I was introduced to Andy and the series of paintings that he was doing to reflect people's trauma. I remember our first talk over Zoom, like most things are these days, and you know, talking about, you know, what my painting would look, what would it symbolise, you know, what would it be. And unbeknownst to me, you know, obviously Andy picked up on it, but there was a theme through everything I was talking about. And, you know, it wasn't my injuries, it wasn't overcoming everything I'd gone through. I think the thing I spoke more about and didn't even realise it was Elaine. You know, that is something I will never get over, and, you know, and I carry her with me all the time. I love and miss her every single day. And then when Andy came back to me and said, right, I'm going to paint Elaine, I was like, wow. I was quite shocked, and it felt almost too personal. And I went, okay, yeah, you know, it was obvious to Andy, maybe not to me, but Elaine dominated everything. And I always remember being quite anxious about the first time I saw the painting. It was in Liverpool, and we went to a place in Liverpool, and the painting was in the room, but there was a cover over it. And I remember we were talking, and I kept on looking at the cover, and I thought, what if I don't like it? You know, I've not got the best poker face, and if I didn't like it, it'd be quite apparent. So I was really nervous and anxious. And then as soon as the cover came off, for me, it was like she was in the room, and it meant the world to me. All I can say is, you know, that painting is Elaine. You know, she used to. This sounds cliched because, you know, when people talk about people they've lost, you know, they always lit up the room when they walked in and that. But she truly did. If you would have met Elaine, she was someone you could open up to. She was someone that you felt like you'd known a lot longer. She was everything to me. You know, she was the love of my life. I was the love of her life. And when she was killed, I was standing next to her. And it could have quite easily been me that was killed. And I know for a fact that if roles were reversed, I would have wanted her to go on and live the best, happiest life possible. And I know that's what she'd want for me. It's been hard, but I try that. I try and do that every day. She joined the police to help people. And in what I do with all the charity work I do, in a small way, I feel like I'm carrying on her legacy. I'll never be half the person that she was, but, you know, I like to think I make a difference in all the people I help. You know, so the human spirit, resilience, overcoming adversity, that's what this Andy's paintings is all about. And I'm just so glad that with Elaine's painting, he got it spot on, and it's beautiful as she was. So thanks, Andy, for that. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Cheers.
When I first heard Paul talking about the revealing of the painting, it was almost a year ago, and I was thinking exactly the same thing as Paul. You know, what if he doesn't like it? And I won't use the expression I could use, but I was worried. But fortunately, yeah. So I'm just moved by the fact that people respond to the paintings the way they do. And if we go to no, sorry, fine. You've done it already. And I think, you know, people ask why I paint stories of trauma, why I paint things which could be seen to be quite dark. And I think there's two reasons. One is because I've met some incredible people, and you've met some of them today. Yeah, I mean, the hope and the resilience and the courage of those people just sort of inspires me. And then the other is really that I get responses like this. I get emails from people saying, you know, that painting, and it will be one painting, it won't be a whole exhibition, it will be one particular painting that someone has resonated with, and it's helped them to see that there is hope and there's a way through the darkness. So that's why I do it, and I think it's just very emotional for me and very moving for everybody else. If we go to the next. So this is the end. I just want to say thank you for attending. I hope you did find that there was empathy and understanding and a sense of hope. I would love any feedback from anybody. That's an email address specific to this project, which is being-seen2025@gmail.com. And I just wanted to, before the final slide, I'll just put up the number for wellbeing for Warwickshire if anybody has been affected by anything they've heard today. It's quite a good general website and helpline, 24/7 helpline, and navigating whatever issue it might be that you contact them with. I just wanted to reiterate something that Jamie said earlier on and paraphrase it slightly, but I hope that for every trauma victim, that sense of feeling that you're still here, knowing that you didn't deserve any of it, and knowing that you matter is what's important. Thank you. And thank you all the speakers. Thank you to Georgia as well.